been to grade school to learn that, did it? 53 years old, still remember it. I can't even believe it. I don't remember nothing else. I have to be as brief as I can here today for a number of reasons. First of all, I told most of you as we were meeting, when we were out going through the process of starting this, I have to say that I'm lucky. I guess you'd say it better. I'm blessed. I have quality friends. When I started watching all this stuff evolve and things, well, like everybody else, I got mad, you know. And one day, just out of the blue, I said, you know, I heard this brilliant speaker 3 years ago. It was genius. And his name was Richard Mack. He wrote this book. It was awesome. I read it. It was great. It was really cool. And I said, well, I wonder where he is, what he's doing. You know, so I started Googling around the internet and found a phone number. So I called it. Man, he picked up the phone. And I thought, wow, I have a national speaker author on the telephone. I kind of just wanted to blow out some steam, but he was very nice. We talked for a little bit, and I got to complain to somebody who probably can help. We all feel like we're empowered. We feel like there's nothing we can do. And that's the despair I was feeling. There's nothing we can do. So I'll just call some national speaker author and I'll just complain to him as if he cares, as if that's never happened before, but he was very nice about it. We talked for a few minutes, and I don't know what I was complaining about, you know, just the same thing you all do. I mean, you're all patriots, you're here. This is the Patriot group. So anyway, Sheriff Mack starts mentioning, I said, you know, we have 3,100 counties. I remember the speech. It was 3,100 counties, 3,100 sheriffs, you know. We got to ask them the question. We got to get a one-stop shop. We can get them, I'm running out of the mouth. And he said, I'd love to do that, and that's what I'm doing. But it costs money, you know, I work as the money comes in, you know. It says, I'm going to need, you know, 10 grand to get through this process, you know. And I thought, wow, there's a target. 10 grand, that's a target. I can work with that. So I told him, I think I can raise that. And he was very gracious, you know, he was very nice. And he said, well, you know, good luck with that, you know, and stay in touch. I said, give me a week or two. Called him up about 10 days later, 14. I said, here's the deal, dude. We got you 10 grand. That is because of the hard work of a close group of friends. I made a couple of phone calls. Colin, our rock, the steady one, he said, well, I got a conference table. Let's meet. Let's talk about it. See if there's anything we want to do. So about 8, 9, 10 of us showed up, you know, and we're mad. Colin says, I'll buy the pizza. And we just said, should we do this? Should we go ask people for money and offer nothing? They couldn't wait. Maybe we were just sick of us. Maybe they just said, I'll give you money to go away and shut up. Maybe there was that. I don't know. But people were just saying, yes, do the job, do the job. He's the man, he can do it. You know, in a matter of 10 days, out of nowhere, a group of idiots goes out and collects $10,000. It's unbelievable. But we did it. Those are the patriots. And I see some of them sitting here today that we were sitting in these little meetings. They're the ones who dug into the pockets. They're the ones who put forth the cash. They're the ones who said, yes, do something. We're like you. We don't know what to do. You're on the right track. He's the man. Well, here he is. And I promised you at these meetings, when we were meeting in bars, cafes, garages, street corners, barns, anywhere else I could find an audience, I'd sit them down and preach at them until they finally said, I'll pay you to go away, which is fine. But either way, Sheriff Mack, I gotta be brief because I promised everybody I'd be brief, and they don't have to listen to an idiot no more, they can listen to you. Once we reach this goal, and here it is, my friend.
If anybody wants to take a picture of this historical event, please do. This is the second largest donation we've ever received at the CSPOA, so you might want to... Can you get it? Oh, okay.
My neighbor and friend, he's on our committee. You'll meet him later.
All right.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I guess I'll start over here. No, I got to go over here first. This sounds like too much echo. Is it okay for you? Yeah. Okay. Just got to make sure this hasn't gone to sleep. Nope, hasn't gone to sleep. housekeeping thing?
Marco Rubio invitation.
Yeah, I've learned from him how to drink the water.
Yeah.
What we don't want you to do, though, is drink the Kool-Aid. And there's far too many people doing that today. I just have to thank you so much for this trip. This is the second time I've been here. I think the last time was 2 years ago, Barb? Yep. 2 years ago. And for a little area, you're very active, and that's fantastic. And to have this many patriots in this small of an area is fantastic. And I didn't quite follow what Tom was saying earlier. What public officials do we have here? Stan? Yeah. Yes, sir? Sheriff?
Police Department.
Police Department.
Yep.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you, sir. Anybody else? City? Oh.
Morning, County Sheriff.
All right.
All right.
Anybody else? Any other deputies, police, county commissioners, state reps?
Chuck Simpson, Red Lake County.
Fantastic.
Randy Olson, Marshall County.
Well, I can't guarantee you that you're going to love everything I say. I can't guarantee that you don't already know a lot of what I say, but I know some of the stuff that I'm going to talk to you about today you've never heard before. Even when I was here 2 years ago, my presentation has gained a lot of momentum and is quite different, and I really get in more to the Supreme Court decision. And in case any of you don't know that, the reason I'm standing in front of you is because when I was a sheriff in Arizona, a small town sheriff, I was raised in a town not too much bigger than Thief River Falls. It was about 10,000 people. And so it's very similar, except they had a warm climate and very seldom did we see snow. But the good Lord meant the snow to be like it is in Arizona. The snow is in the mountains. In the valleys, no snow. Okay? That's the way the good Lord meant it to be. So, at least I think so. But what I promise you also is that I didn't come all the way out here from Mesa, Arizona to give you a bunch of Richard Mack opinions. I don't want to waste your time with that, and I certainly wouldn't waste my time with that. I am a messenger here. I am the messenger to show you what is kind of wrong and what we need to do to straighten it out, but I will show you the evidence. I used to be a detective, and I'm going to show you the evidence. What you do with it and what your verdict is at the end is up to you. But I'm going to show it to you, and I'm going to show you that there's still hope for America. But I will not show you how that hope rests in Washington, D.C. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Forget Washington, D.C., and let's take back America here at home. Here at home. So that as a precursor, I'm going to take you through a Supreme Court decision that was won by a couple of small town sheriffs, and how miraculous that was, and what we need to do to comply with that decision, and what we need to do to comply with the Constitution. And the greatest enforcers of the Constitution are we the people. The greatest part of our government is we the people. Our entire Constitution starts with those three words, we the people. And so we the people have got a lot of work to do. When you take and look at it, that it's up to us to save America. But you get we the people working with county commissioners and the sheriff, and we can win this. And I'm telling you, we can win it. More importantly, it stays peaceful.
Yes.
But if we don't get local officials on board and stand for freedom, then we're not going to win this. Or at least it will not remain peaceful. And I shudder to think what the alternative would be to that. I don't want that for my family, and I don't want it for yours. And I'm here because of the cliche, and it might be cliche, but it is exactly where my heart is. I'm here for God, family, and country. That's the reason I stand before you today. This is the reason I sued the Clinton administration. A little small-town David sheriff taking on the Clinton administration and winning. And now, let's take that spirit of freedom and do it again. But I will never tell anybody, sue the federal government. We got to sue them. If you want to stop gun control, well, we got to sue them. Well, we've already had all sorts of Second Amendment decisions, especially recently. McDonald from Chicago and Heller from Washington, D.C. We already know what the Second Amendment means, and I don't need another court trying to interpret what shall not be infringed means. In fact, they don't even hardly ever address that issue. And isn't it amazing that we live in a country under a government rule book called the U.S. Constitution, and of all the God-given rights that the good Father said in his prayer, we're talking about the pursuit of happiness and life and liberty. And to protect those three principles, we devised the Constitution, and we made one specific reference to one of those God-given rights, and the one that says, shall not be infringed, is the one that's the infringed the most. How did that happen? And we're all being told by the politicians that it's okay, trust us. We're doing this for your own good. Who else said that? Oh yeah, him. And so we're doing things analogous to Adolf Hitler in America, and we think it's just fine. And that leads me to what I wanted to tell you anyway at the beginning. I do my commercial message at the beginning, and that leads us right into my most recent book. Because this book came out about 14 months ago. It's called The Magic of Gun Control. Because I made a new word for this book. It's polymagician. You already got it. A polymagician is a politician who's an illusionist. And he wants you to buy his magic. Because if gun control works today, I guess I better plug in. All right, good. I'm glad that woke me up. If the polymagicians would have their way, they would have you buying into the illusion, into thinking that they're doing this for your own good. And they are implementing the same policies that Stalin and Hitler and Fidel Castro have all done, and many others. You can look at that. And some of those statistics are in my first book, and I had this here when I was here 2 years ago, From My Cold Dead Fingers, Why America Needs Guns. And that's my very first book. That was done in 1994, and I rewrote it in 2000. Very, very powerful book, and this is the sequel. Because if gun control provided any benefit whatsoever, it would be magic. Thus the title. The Magic of Gun Control. You want to know the ending? There isn't any. There isn't any magic. And the book kind of answers the question, how would gun control work in America? When it's precisely and explicitly forbidden here. We're the only country in the world where our government is based on a constitution, and the Constitution forbids gun control. How about just a little gun control? Well, we're way beyond that because we have over 20,000 gun control laws in America today. The only way, and if you look at some of the founding fathers, what they said about gun control, there was one of them, and I think it was Samuel Adams, who this is the only hint that it's okay to try to keep a gun away from someone who has committed gun violence. Is that he said that you can never take a gun away from the peaceful citizens. Okay? So now all their laws are trying to make us all criminals somehow, and yet we've not committed any crime. And while we're on the subject of all this propaganda scheme that's going very well because the media are totally supporting this entire gun control propaganda scheme, is that some of us in the freedom movement and even some patriots have bought into this that the government has a right to require and to force and to mandate a criminal history, mental history background check before you are allowed to exercise your Second Amendment guaranteed rights. Does that sound all right?
No.
It's not all right with me. And the only way that a background check would be legal and proper is if it's voluntary. It's the only way they can do it. And let's say that you go into a gun shop and the guy says, the owner says, I would like to do a background check on you. Okay. As long as it's not mandated by the ATF and the ATF isn't keeping my records and the FBI isn't keeping those records, I'll do it. Okay? That's the only way it would be legal or lawful or constitutional. And so don't buy into this thing that, oh yeah, 75% of Americans think we should have background checks. How long have we been having background checks in America? I sued to stop the background check, but that part didn't get stopped. In 1994, the FBI, well, first they required the sheriffs to do it, and then about 2 or 3 years later, the FBI took over and did the background checks. And I objected, but the only thing that we won on was saying that the federal government couldn't force us to do it and couldn't make us do it. And so many of us stopped doing it. Some sheriffs kept doing it anyway, even after our lawsuit and after we won. But the background checks have then been in place pretty much since 1996, and they're trying to act like they haven't been. Well, they have. And so have they done any good is the question. Did it stop any of these school shootings? Did it stop criminals from getting guns? Of course not. But now they're going to make it much more strict. And who is that going to affect? Just us. Just the law-abiding citizens. And so they're going to do whatever they can to either make us criminals or make us comply. And do we have to do either? No. And this thing about, did you hear Pierce Morgan? He had my good friend Larry Pratt on a couple of times. And he was talking about a lot of these key issues. And he said, why does anybody need an AR-15? Why does anybody need an assault rifle? Well, first, he doesn't even know the definition of an assault rifle, and I'm not sure that it was ever a technical military term anyway. However, he still doesn't know what he's talking about, but that was obvious if you watched any of his shows. And he said, why do you need an AR-15? Tell me why anybody would need that, because all they're good for is to shoot and kill people. Well, I spent 20 years in law enforcement. I've never killed anybody. And I've used all sorts of sophisticated weaponry. I've never killed anybody. Never. And never shot myself, never shot some innocent person, never did any of that. So obviously that's not true, because that's not their only purpose. Because I've used them a lot of times. But the quick answer on what do you need an assault rifle for? Don't you just feel like saying this? Say it. I mean, go ahead and just say the truth. It's none of your damn business why I have one. Okay? That's it. That's just the quick answer, and it's true. I'm a free American. I'm a free man. And I don't have to tell you or anybody else in government why I have a gun or what kind of gun I own. And it's none of your business, government, what kind of gun I own or what kind of magazine I put in my gun. It's none of your business. In fact, it is expressly forbidden for you to intermeddle with this at all. And so why do we talk about the Second Amendment? Because it's obvious that it's the most abused. And it is the one that says shall not be infringed. And they act like it says just the opposite. Oh, shall be infringed. They just missed that little not word, just 3 letters. They have no authority. Barack Obama or any other person that sits in the White House has no authority to tell you or anybody else or suggest to Congress that we should have a criminal history background check before we are allowed to exercise our Second Amendment guarantees. So let's make sure that we're solid on that, because once we start compromising and once we start allowing them to have authority they don't have constitutionally, then that's the slippery slope where they end up taking everything from us. And so that's the reason we're here, is to make sure those slopes don't happen anymore. And so, really a terrific book. Every one of you should take this home with you today. just finish here and we'll get this commercial out of the way. This is the book that I wrote 4 years ago in 2 weeks. 4 years and 2 weeks ago, this book came out, The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope. And I wrote it pursuant to the election of 2008. And it came out February 15th of 2009. And so now this has been distributed over 160,000 copies nationwide. Every sheriff has received it in the country, and some new sheriffs, since we did this 2 years ago, there's some new sheriffs, so if there's any sheriff that doesn't have it, make sure they get one. And if there's any public officials in here today, make sure they go home with them, the ones that stood up. We definitely want you to have this. And this book asks the question, and it comes from Thomas Jefferson, quote on the very first page from Thomas Jefferson, "When all government shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, it will render powerless the checks provided and become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated." In other words, if we don't adhere to the Constitution and keep the federal government impotent, just like the Constitution intended for them to be powerless and to only have discrete enumerated powers, and we're going to go over that today. I'm going to show you this. I told you I'd show you the evidence. If we don't keep those checks in place, then we're going to have the same old King George III government. And guess what we have today? King George III government. In fact, you can look at the abuses as detailed in the Declaration of Independence. We're probably worse off today than the colonists were in 1776. Basically, more like 1770 and thereabouts. The Boston Massacre was actually 1773, so things have been festering for years. And this book, this should be read, not by every public official, but by every citizen. The sheriff works for you. You're his only boss. The county commissioners work for you. You're their only boss. You need to know what they're supposed to know. It's only 50 pages. But I didn't want anybody to tell me they didn't have time to read it. You know, I always tell the sheriffs and cops, you can read this while you eat a donut. And then I wrote a book that detailed my personal conversion story. So I told you I wasn't going to come here and bore you with a lot of stuff about me. So this is not my conversion to the gospel. This is my conversion to the Constitution. To America. And I'm going to share a little bit of that with you today, but it's in here. And then I talk about some things in here that I don't think law enforcement realizes they should not be doing. And that we as local law enforcement, local police, and local sheriffs, and local authorities should be making sure that the people in our communities are not having their rights violated. And if we're not doing that, then I don't think anybody really needs us. And we're going to go over that too. And then I have a 6 DVD set. There's 6 DVDs in here. It takes about 7 hours to watch this. And I'm telling you right now, it's probably the most worthwhile 7 hours you can spend. We had 2 national conventions in 2012. One of them was January 31st of last year, and the most recent one was September 17th, Constitution Day, where we met with a lot of sheriffs all across the country learning about the Constitution, our oath of office, and the theory of interposition. We have Chris Ann Hall, Stuart Rose, Larry Pratt, Michael Badneri, Joe Bannister, former IRS agent, Peggy Littleton, a county commissioner from Colorado, Bill Jasper, Ken Ivory, a state rep from Utah, Joe Wolverton, a constitutional attorney, Larry B. Kraft, constitutional attorney, and yours truly. And then there's a few sheriffs on here. There's actually about 12 sheriffs that spoke, and I think only maybe 4 or 5 actually made the cut to get on here. But we want to do this a lot more. And this DVD set, it's $49.95 on the website. It's $40 here today, and you really want to view that within your little groups. It's a very powerful thing. You can see for yourself the power of this thing and feel feel of the patriotism and the familiarity that we all received via the founding fathers of our Constitution and of American ideals. And that's what this whole thing is about. And this is really a powerful tool to keep with you and to have and to share with other people. And then perhaps the most powerful little tool I have is this little booklet. Fits with your pocket Constitution. And this is a highlighted version of the Supreme Court decision of the Mack-Printz victory against the Clinton administration. Yeah, I actually sued the Clinton administration and lived to tell about it. So if any of you think that I was just hoping and sitting and waiting and hiding and hoping to brats on the Clinton administration, just hoping they would do something so I could sue them, you know, that notion is absolutely ridiculous. All I wanted was to be sheriff. I didn't need another full-time job, which is taking the federal government to federal court. It's another full-time job. And it was, well, anyway. It was too much. And I wanted to start right there. Why would a small-town sheriff from southern Arizona, the youngest sheriff in the state, sue his own government? Can you imagine how crazy that must have been? And what happened is 3 agents of the BATF showed up at a Sheriff's Association meeting in Phoenix. And we only have 15 counties in Arizona. We don't know why you people in the Midwest and other places have so many counties. You know, I just lived in Texas for a while. They have 254 there. They have too many too, even though they are a big state. 254 counties in that state. But anyway, the counties in Arizona are quite large. We had 12 sheriffs at the meeting, and 3 agents of the BATF were sitting in there, and they went up, they were on the agenda first, and they handed each of us a document. And they said, Sheriffs, these documents detail your marching orders as to what you have to do to comply with the Brady Bill. Well, I watched while Bill Clinton signed the Brady Bill into law. And they didn't say anything about sheriffs having to participate. Hey, they didn't tell the truth about the Brady Bill. Wow. Go figure that one, huh? And so Bill Clinton used his left hand and he signed the Brady Bill into law. And he said, the Brady Bill is going to make the streets of America so safe that even our nation's police officers won't need to carry guns anymore. Yeah, that Billy Bob, he was always a good entertainer, wasn't he? He always made me laugh. And the one in there now makes me nauseated. And I just, people ask me if I watched the State of the Union address. And I said, my stomach would not handle 1 second of that bull. And so I did not watch any of it. No, not 1 second. So I wasn't going to sue Clinton over making that statement, but I had no idea that sheriffs were being dragooned into federal service until the 3 agents showed up at our meeting on January 21st, 1994. And all the sheriffs were just outraged by this. Well, it got worse. They said, you have to do this because Congress made a law. Well, I don't work for Congress. They can make 50,000 laws trying to say that the sheriff works for them. I still don't. And I'm going to show you the evidence of that. Again, I told you, I'll show you the evidence. As we go on with this presentation, you will be able to see the evidence for yourself. And so then they went even stronger on the abuse and the dragooning of our office. They said, and you guys have to pay for it. You have to do all these criminal history background checks. You have to check everybody. You have to check the gun shops in your county. And then you have to file all the paperwork. And you have to use your personnel. And you have to pay for it. There's no money attached to this. Wow. Sounds reasonable. I don't get any input. We're not making a contract. We don't have any agreement on this. We just have to do it because Congress said so. Well, what if Congress made a law saying that kidnapping is legal? Or rape? Or murder? Oh, they're already doing that on murder. They can use their drones against us anytime they want to. You know, things keep happening and we're all saying, no, that would never happen in America. and it does, and what are we doing? So, yeah, where we are now. And so, then, you think this could get any worse? These guys aren't finished. And they go, well, and there's this little provision in the Brady bill. We're certain that no one's going to do this. We're sure that Janet Reno, you can trust her. She's in charge of the Justice Department, and we're sure they're not going to enforce this part, but there's a little provision that if you fail to comply, you're subject to federal arrest. They're saying that to sheriffs. And we're all supposed to go, oh yeah, we're going to do this. Thanks for coming in. We're just going to lie down and take all this. Well, actually, most sheriffs did. 7 ended up fighting this. And there was one other who just said no. Sheriff Nixon from Montana. He says, I'm not joining the Mack lawsuit. I'm just not going to do it. These guys can't tell me what to do. And he was right. He was absolutely right. And that's what we need to do now. No more going to court. We tell them no. And we have a lot of ammunition to do that with. Do you really think, and this case took 3.5 years and about $450,000. Do you really think there's time or money enough to take all this to court? No. Not even close. So, at that point, I decided that, well, it took me 3 hours to drive home, and I was just brooding and brooding. And none of the other sheriffs wanted to do anything about it. They said, you can't fight City Hall. Who wants you to believe that? City Hall. They want you to believe that you can't say no. They want you to believe that you're just farmers with pitchforks, and there's nothing you can do about anything. Well, for the most part, I just felt frustrated that we didn't just tell them unitedly, just send this form back to Washington and tell them we're not doing it. And that would have been entirely appropriate. Tell these stupid lawmakers we're not following their stupid laws. The enforcement of stupid laws is the essence of tyranny. That's a quote from Edmund Burke. So I had 3 hours to drive home, and by the time I got home, I decided, it hit me. I'm going to sue the Clinton administration. I'm going to sue my own government to get out from underneath this. And it scared me to death. I mean, it really scared me. And even scarier yet, I had to go in the house and tell the pretty little blonde girl that I married. And then I'm going, I kind of took comfort in that. I go, well, you know, she's going to talk me out of it. And I was glad to know that she was probably going to do her wife thing. You know, most wives are going to say, are you nuts? We have 5 children. Look at all we put into this to get this job in the first place, and you just want to throw it all away? And so I went in and I said, I'm going to sue the Clinton administration, and they're going to squash me like a pumpkin seed, and we're going to lose everything, and I hope you don't mind. Well, any of you ladies, you think you're just going to say, oh, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. Okay. And, of course, she looked at me bewildered, and I just said, look, I explained to her what it was, and I said, it's probably going to cost us everything. Career, job, moving, home. And this is where the decision was made, my dear friends, especially you ladies. This is where the decision was made. She said, well, as I recall, we weren't really looking for a job when we landed this one. And besides, maybe now we know why you were supposed to be sheriff. I came from a beautiful little blonde girl, very sensitive to maybe something more than ourselves. And I said, okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. And she just kind of shrugged and went about doing whatever she was doing. At 9 or 9:30 at night, maybe finishing getting the kids to bed or helping them with homework, I don't know. And then the next day I go to work. Now, any of you constitutional scholars, I know a lot of you patriots pay attention to the Constitution. Do any of you want to advise me, advise Sheriff Mack, how to file this lawsuit against the federal government? I know, I'll call a lawyer, one of my buddies down on Main Street, and tell him to get going on this for me. What's he going to tell me? He's going to tell me what my wife should have said. Are you nuts? You know, and he's going to say that, for sure. But he's also going to say, I'm not certified, I can't take the case, I have to be certified to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. I didn't know anything about that until I tried to do this. And then how much money are they going to cost me? Yeah, I didn't have any money. And so, you know, growing up in law enforcement, you're not going to have much money unless you're on the tape. And I was never on that either. And so my undersheriff walks in the room as I'm contemplating what to do with all this, and I remembered that he was a lifetime member of the NRA. I wasn't a member of anything. Not anything. I'd never been hunting a day in my life. I still haven't. But if you guys want to bring the venison back, I'll eat it. I love venison. So great. But I said, hey, Mike. I told him what I was doing, and he says, well, that sounds impossible. And I said, yeah. And I said, does the NRA have like a toll-free number you can call and get advice? I said, I really need some advice here. He gave me some toll-free number. I called it. I finally, after waiting and getting passed around, I ended up in the office of Richard Gardner. And Gardner was a lawyer for the NRA. And I told him who I was, what I wanted to do, and the next statement blew me away. He said, Sheriff, we've already been preparing the paperwork on this case, and we've been praying that you would call. And I was thrilled. I got kind of excited, and I'm just, you know, I have a national organization, the biggest gun rights organization in the world, and one of the biggest organizations in the world of anything, and they're going to pay for the whole thing, and they're going to provide lawyers, and it's going to make it so much easier. And then I said, we're going to finally prove to the people of this country and prove in court that the Second Amendment defends the Second. And I'm going on and on about the Second Amendment, how, you know, I'm cheerleading. And he goes, I could just see him put his hand up. He goes, calm down, Sheriff. We're not even suing on the Second Amendment. And I go, you're the NRA, that's what you do. Even I know that. He goes, we have no standing on the Second Amendment. He says, neither do you. He says, you're exempt from the Brady Bill background checks. All you have to do is show your badge and you get a gun. You don't have to do a background check. I said, so what are we suing? And you said you're preparing the paperwork. What are you preparing? He said, we're preparing a 10th Amendment challenge. It's airtight. We will win this. I said, states' rights? He goes, yeah. And I go, what? He goes, according to the 10th Amendment, the federal government has no authority to tell you to do anything. And I smiled real big and I went, even better. And I said, let's get him. But I said, and this is where I thought I was going to ruin the whole thing. But I still had to do this. I said, I really appreciate all you're doing and all you're offering here. It's more than I ever imagined. I said, but I want my own lawyer on this. I don't want this just to be the NRA case. He says, great, we'll work with your lawyer. Oh, thank goodness. And I said, well, can you recommend one out here in Arizona that knows and understands the Second Amendment and the Constitution? He goes, yeah, Dave Hardy used to work for us. He lives in Tucson. I called Hardy, hired him as my own lawyer. He got together with the NRA lawyers who he already knew. And on February 28th, 1994, the very day the Brady Bill took effect, my lawyer with the NRA lawyers filed in federal district court in Tucson, Arizona, Mack versus U.S. And then this thing had so many twists and turns. A little over 2 years ago, it took another twist. And a huge turn. A horrible thing happened. The judge who first heard my case was killed and murdered at the assassination attempt at the Safeway parking lot in Tucson. Judge John M. Roll. A man who saved me. A principled judge who told his own boss, the federal government, you exceeded your authority when you passed the Brady Bill, thereby impermissibly encroaching upon the powers retained by the states pursuant to the 10th Amendment. And he shook his finger at him several times, and even in court, he did it again and again. And every pretrial motion he sided with me. And this was a principled man who didn't care about building his career, but he cared about standing for the Constitution. And he died January 8th, 2009, in that parking lot, 2011, in the parking lot there. getting in the way of a bullet meant for someone else. And you might say, he did the same for me. He got in the way of the federal government. He stopped them from going after me. This was a great man, and I want you to know that in the magic of gun control, this book is worth getting alone so you can read the chapter about Judge Roll. He was absolutely an astonishing man. And I'll never forget him, and I'll always be in his debt. And I always wanted to go have lunch with him, and it just never happened. And we can all learn about what he did for us, though. And I'm going to show you some of that evidence, too. So then after that happened, Sheriff Printz joined the lawsuit about 3 or 4 weeks later from Montana, and then Sheriff Cook from Texas, Romero from Louisiana, McGee from Mississippi, Frank from Vermont, and Anders from Wyoming. 7 out of nearly 3,100 sheriffs, only 7 did this lawsuit. Told them no, not going to do it. And so there's a lot of things I learned from this process, and there's a lot of things that I think we can learn from this today. And I'm going to show this to you. We've had some sheriffs say, well, I have to do what the Supreme Court tells me. Well, if that were true, then they would be your boss. But the people of your county are your boss. And when you took your job, and I'm talking about from the dog catcher all the way down to the president. Dog catcher, president. Oh, you caught that. Okay. From the dog catcher all the way down to the president, every one of these public officials swears an oath of allegiance to the Constitution. So when you take your job as a sheriff or county commissioner or police officer or whatever, you promise to uphold and defend, protect, and preserve the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota. Can you violate that if judges tell you it's okay? Can you violate that if your supervisor tells you it's okay? Can you violate that if the legislature tells you you can't? Or even tells you you should? You can't. So you have to know and understand the Constitution and those who wrote it, the intent of those who wrote it. In law enforcement, we always have to prove intent. Well, right now, we're going to do some of that too. We're going to prove the intent of the founders. And before we get into this, there's 3 things that I believe every person in this country should know. Before we can even have a conversation about government or history or America, every high school student should know this. These 3 things. Every college student should be able to recite this and have it memorized and tell you these 3 things. Everyone in this room should know these 3 things. And I know most of you do. But we're going to clarify it right here and now. First of all, number 1, what is the purpose of all government? Why do we have government? There came a time in my life, that's really close. There came a time in my life where I was a rookie cop, and I wanted to know, why am I writing all these tickets? Why is it that I'm treating people like this? Why am I plundering their substance? What are we doing that's really providing a benefit to society and the community? And I was looking for those answers, and I came smack in the face in my research to the oath of office. And I look at this oath of office, and I'm going, I signed this? I promised to do this? What a liar and a hypocrite I am. And I almost quit my job over it. But my wife convinced me not to quit my job, but to just quit being a liar and a hypocrite. What's that called? Repentance, yeah. Isn't that repentance, Father? Yeah. Stop being a liar and a hypocrite, change, do what you're supposed to do. So I started studying the Constitution. It was amazing. The Bill of Rights especially. And the one that hit me the hardest was number 8. It says, no cruel and unusual punishment, nor excessive fines or bail. What are tickets? Tickets are all 3 sometimes. They're cruel, they're excessive, Wow. They ruin lives sometimes. Yeah. Anyway. Oh, and not to mention, how much does your insurance get raised because of it? And insurance companies are private companies, and why do they get to be involved in the ticket writing process that's government? They're not part of government. They're insurance companies. Why would AIG have anything to say about you getting a traffic ticket? And you know what? I really believe that if we look at our jobs as law enforcement through the prism of the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, we're going to write a lot fewer tickets. We're not going to want to do administrative checkpoints or DUI checkpoints. Well, then how are we going to stop DUIs? Follow the rules. That's how. We can still get them. I promise you that. I don't compromise on DUIs. Never have. I would have arrested my mother for DUI. No brakes on DUI. Sorry. I don't care who you are. But this is the thing. We have to set the example in following the rules. And if we cut the corners on the Constitution to go after DUIs or any other criminals, then that makes us part of the problem. And I think that we just need to get back to those basic fundamental principles that our country has found. We don't need to move forward. The answer isn't forward. We heard that enough during the campaign, didn't we? The solution, my friends, is behind us. It's in the foundation of America. How about my proposal would be that every public official, federal, state, and local, especially local, we follow the Constitution and especially the Bill of Rights for 1 year. And we don't let anybody violate it, no matter what. 1 year. If we're not better off in that 1 year, I'll go home and I'll settle insurance. I'll do anything else. Follow the Constitution 1 year. I think we'd all be amazed. Absolutely amazed. Okay, the first one. What is the purpose of all government? What is it? Where do we see in any of our foundational documents what it is? I taught this class one day at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. And I asked, the class was this big. There was 250, almost 300 students in the audience. And I said, what is it? Where do we see what the purpose of all government, what this little girl raised her hand was? To form a more perfect union. And I said, that's a real great quote from the preamble. And it's wrong. That's not why we have government, to form a more perfect union. The reason we have government is we turn to the Declaration of Independence. And we see these rights, these creator-endowed rights that we were blessed and endowed by our Creator. We can't even talk about that in schools today, can we? Can't even talk about the Declaration of Independence, creator-endowed rights, because God is not allowed in our schools. Another ridiculous mistake by the courts that ruled that. And does that have any bearing on what we do here in this little town? Of course not. We run our own communities here. So we look at that anyway. What are those creator-endowed rights? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, ownership of property. Okay? My castle is mine. Nobody in government can mess with my castle unless I say so. That's what ownership of property is. That's part of the pursuit of happiness. Okay? Government's job is not to guarantee happiness, is it? It's to guarantee the opportunity. Okay? That's it. Okay? Not to make sure that we're all equal, but that we all have equal opportunity. Okay? Now, the very next line after life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, it's the next line, and I don't want you to forget it. Comma. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That almost sounds religious. Because it is. Of course it is. That we are here to protect God-given rights, and that wouldn't be a religious obligation? Of course it is. That to secure these rights is the reason we have all government. So what's government's job? To protect life, liberty, and property. And even in protecting those, you can never violate the Constitution and say, well, I have to violate the Constitution if I'm going to protect your life because those evil guns are out there and they're going to kill people. I haven't haven't yet been able to see where we've proved once where a gun went off all by itself. And when somebody in court all of a sudden says, and the gun just went off. Yeah, because your finger was on the trigger. And you went like this. You know? You squeeze or you jerk, whatever it is. But very rarely do they go off by themselves. Second, what's the purpose of the Constitution? Okay? We already know what the purpose of all government is, to secure God-given rights. Second, the purpose of the Constitution was to specifically limit what government could do to make sure. Now, remember, the Founding Fathers are devising this Constitution. What was going on in their mind that they wanted to make sure would never happen again? Any of the abuses from King George III. He was just a punk kid trying to have fun at the expense of the colonists. He was a spoiled little brat. And so he would just do whatever. You know, his advisor telling him, oh, these colonists are getting crazy, we better do so. Oh, we'll tax the heck out of them. You know? And so that led up to the Revolutionary War. And so the purpose of the Constitution was to make sure that the abuses that they had already gone through could never happen again. And they were going to make government limited. That these were the rules and limitations for the federal government, especially. So that none of the abuses could ever be repeated again. So, the short answer for number 2 is this. To limit government. To guarantee its impotency. That it had no more power than what they were going to say specifically in Article 1, Section 8. The Constitution, what did Jefferson say, is the chains by which our politicians would be bound. Do you notice any politicians bound by anything today? No, of course not. They don't care. They don't care about the Constitution. They'll even tell you at public meetings like this. Some of your congressmen have done it. They've come to meetings. Why don't you follow the Constitution? Oh, it doesn't really apply today. And it's flexible. It's breathable.